What's up guys, it's Cody. I'm on day 103 of the Odin project. Today I added some functions to my import feature for my final JavaScript project. I'm building a website that users can upload their sensory lexicons to. So this import feature is going to allow the user to select a file to upload, and then they're going to verify that their data is okay, then click a submit button to process the data, send it to the database. So today it was oriented around processing the attributes and the references that are within their lexicon and then submitting them to the database. So let's take a look at the screen and see what I got done. If we look over here, we have the handle submit function, which is going to fire when the user clicks this submit button over here. And so we can see that they've already selected a file, and the table that is rendered after that file is selected appears here, and it has their attributes and their references for those attributes. So they have to confirm that this data is okay, and then they're going to click this submit button. This handle submit function is going to fire. We're going to get the attributes from the lexicon state that's at a parent component level. We're going to iterate over those attributes, and for each attribute we're going to then add that attribute to the database. And so this is the first function that I finalized today. So I worked on this a little bit last week, but this function takes an attribute, and so that's the attribute from the lexicon, and those are going to be objects with methods and properties. For the database, we just want the properties and values, so we're going to return the attribute object that just has properties and values from the attribute object and set it as this attribute object variable. We're also going to set an attribute ID, because that's ultimately what we're going to return from this, so that we can use that within the state to set the attribute ID after it's been added. But first we go to this try catch, and within the try catch, this is where we're going to be actually adding the attribute object to the attribute collection. So this is a Firestore database backend as a service that I'm working with, and then that's going to return the reference to the attribute here. That's going to have an ID, and that's going to be our attribute ID that we use right at the line below, but also a bit further down. After the attribute's been added, we're going to update the keys for the attribute lexicon key pairs, and so this is a relational database kind of structure. Instead of storing attributes within the lexicons themselves, they're going to be separated out into different collections, different databases, and we'll have this key pairing to bring them together when we want to actually get all the data for the lexicon. So a collection for that is going to have the ID of attribute ID, and then it's going to have a property of LID that is going to be the lexicon ID that corresponds to that attribute. And so that should run if everything was successful. If there was an error, we're going to console log it, and we're also going to set the attribute ID to error, and we're going to return the attribute ID down here. We'll see that down here we're setting that to this variable attribute ID. We're going to wait until that attribute ID's promise has been filled, so then we actually have the attribute ID, and then we're going to check if it's an error. If it's an error, we're going to console log it. Everything else, we're going to then proceed as normal, which is going to be setting the attribute ID within the attribute object that's being managed within the state, and iterating over the attributes references to add them to the database. So this is going to be essentially the same exact thing that we just did with the attributes down here, but for each reference within the attribute. So that's where we see these references, and it's going to be within the for loop for the attributes themselves. So we have an add reference to database function here, which is going to be another async function returning promises, having this try catch, adding to this specifically the references, and then adding to a key pair document that has references and attributes kind of linked up, and then we're going to return the reference ID if that try was successful. If there was an error, we're going to return a string with error within it, and we're going to do the same thing down here. We're going to set the reference ID for each reference if it didn't come back with an error. I want to show you guys what that looks like. So I'm not going to show you the database, but I will show you some of the console logs that we're getting back. So if I click this submit button over here, we see that all the attribute IDs are now being returned, and now a bunch of reference IDs are being returned. So that's telling me that it was successfully added for all the attributes and all the reference IDs. So that's just to show you guys, that it's actually working, and it's uploading to the database, because these are the database IDs that are coming back Firestore themselves. That's all I have for you guys today. So if you guys are interested in following mine and Emily's journeys into web development, then definitely hit subscribe. I'll have a stream tomorrow night and Thursday night from 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Twitch. So if you're free and if you just want to come hang out, then definitely feel free to stop by, and I will see you guys on Wednesday on the next vlog.